So thanks everybody for coming out today. I'm going to tell you a story about the development of the Roomba floor cleaning robot. And if you want to check out, there's a couple of artifacts on the table over here, where one of them will make more sense as we go through the presentation. It's a bit of a fairy tale. So once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a storied land known as Cambridge. And nestled within that land was the kingdom called the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. And it came to pass that a lord of that realm, one Professor Rodney Brooks, declared, "There shall be a talent show." But Lord Brooks insisted on a most wondrous, strange condition, for no living person could participate in the show. Only robots would be allowed. To make it so, kits of parts were set forth, Legos, motors, microprocessors, sensors of all manner, tutorials were held, teams were formed, and building commenced. Indeed, all contractually obligated work at the lab came to a halt as we demigods brought forth our creations. So this is some photographs from that time. Here's me 36 years ago. So in the fullness of time, a veritable revolution of robots were created. But as it so happened, the revolution was televised.
Welcome to the benefits and intelligence of MIT, the cutting edge of computer research. So here's what you need to do for all. The some of these robots is in plot.
Yeah, cognizant of what suicide around the room. Using the thing I dressed in COVID, radical wasn't good because
Stupid
shit. That is.
So this is at the faculty club at MIT on the night of the...
demonstrated at a robot talent show last week.
Just comes around in an increasing spiral, trying to pick up all dirt. With this sort of stuff.
Well, they didn't pick up all of the dirt, but that's the story for another time. So anyway, the timeline for this was that the idea of the Robot Olympics came up, and I started working on this little robot that would clean the floor of my apartment. And to get from there to the show, it took about a month. And if you want to, you can see that thing that I built on the table over here. Yeah, it's careful about picking it up, though.
Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, so that took a month, but then to get from that to an actual product that worked in the real world, that took another 13 years. But the little Lego creature is the earliest direct ancestor of Roomba. Anyway, I didn't start working on the product version right away because it was just too much fun being at the lab. I love being at the Artificial Intelligence Lab. I mean, it was such an exciting place, and look at all the cool stuff that we had there. So this is the arm that I was actually employed to work on, and I worked. The folks that I worked with, including my boss, who's this guy up here, wanted to write a book about it, and I learned a wonderful lesson from that. Because when I was a kid, I thought that authors lived up on Mount Olympus. They weren't like regular people. But since we wrote a book together, I realized actually regular people can write books. So that's been a very helpful lesson for me. And then the other stuff at the AI lab, there was the black and red thing on the corner was called the connection machine because it was an early parallel computer, highly parallel computer. And the one in the middle with all the wires is a Lisp machine. It's a machine that was designed to make it easy to execute the Lisp language, which turns out is the best computer language that ever has been. And then look at all the robots down here. It was just a wonderful place. So like I said earlier, I was a physics undergraduate. I discovered that my true calling is robots. And the lab was a wonderful place, so I thought, I will stay at the lab forever. And then the lab ran out of money, I got laid off. So, but I couldn't give up robots. So I started looking for another place to work, and it turned out that even though there were very few robot companies in the country in those days, there was one in Wilmington called Denny Mobile Robotics, and even better, I knew a guy who worked there, so he got me an interview with their vice president, and it worked out, so I started working there. And Denning made big robots. And their flagship robot is the Denning Sentry, which was used to patrol the hallways of warehouses and offices and stores and such like. But they didn't do very well. They had placed 7 of these robots at different places, but they all came back on very favorable terms, but they all came back. So I was thinking, I know how to turn this business around. Instead of working on the big robots, we should work on a tiny little robot. So I proposed that Denning develop a little robot that would clean home floors. And I even got to work, I got the services of this Jack Shimmick, who was one of probably the only mechanical engineer at Denning at the time. So we worked together on this thing, and it was kind of a back burner project. So it took 3 or 4 months to actually get it. But we used the guts of a Bissell floor cleaner to build our creation. And unfortunately, as far as I know, not a single photograph was ever taken of this thing that we built. So from memory, I constructed this model of kind of what it looked like. Anyway, we demonstrated it to the whole company, including the CEO of Denning, and we were thinking, this is great. Everybody applauded at the end, and the next thing that's going to happen is that we're going to come up with a business plan and turn this thing into a real product. And then Jack and I were both fired. So, well, they said we were furloughed, but I'm still waiting for the call back. Anyway, the Denning CEO just thought that we were just playing with toys. He didn't have any use for such small things. And this was December 10th, 1991. Quite a long time ago. But about this same time, there was this new company starting up, formed by our familiar Professor Rod Brooks and his graduate student Colin Engel, Colin's wife Jill, and another woman, Helen Grainer, whom they had been associated, they'd all been associated with the lab. Anyway, they started this company that was called IS Robotics, and the idea was to commercialize the ideas that Rod had come up with for how to program a robot. It's a thing called behavior-based programming. And I think that I might have gotten the job because at the Robot Talent Show, Rod had made this system for programming the robots based on his ideas about this new paradigm. And I think I was the only one who actually used his ideas to build my robot, so it probably gave me a leg up. Anyway, the company purred along for a while. It turned out it wasn't easy to make money from robots. Most people who had tried it, crashed and burned. But very gradually and very slowly, over many years, IS Robotics gradually built up. Eventually, they changed the name to iRobot. That was a while later. And we were a scrappy little company in the beginning, and nobody got market rate salaries because there wasn't enough money coming in for that. And the thing that you see in the background here is our cleaning responsibilities. We couldn't afford to hire people to clean the floors of our offices, so we had to do it ourselves. And I just want to point out that my job was vacuuming. I had to gave me an incentive to do something different. Anyway. Slowly over time, we built a whole bunch of robots. They got a lot of attention in the press, not a lot of money, but a lot of attention. And we got to the point where S.C. Johnson came to us, and they wanted us to build an auto scrubber. Now, you might not have heard the term, but you have all seen auto scrubbers, because if you go into a building late at night, you'll see this guy riding behind this big machine that's going along the floor, and it's got a spinning brush, and it scrubs and burnishes the floor, and that's an auto scrubber. So we tried to build one of those, and it was a project that we called the Clean Project. But the background here kind of tells the story. It didn't work well. A lot of problems with the Clean Project. It was a train wreck. And the thing that we were trying to build, this wasn't it. This was, we never got the robot all the way together. But we did, a company called Tennant, which makes cleaning equipment, took the intellectual property that we had developed for it, and they turned it into this manual machine, which has some interesting properties. So, S.E. Johnson pulled the plug on our project, and the next thing that happened was one of the people that that we'd hired for that project got to thinking, well, why don't we build this little robot that cleans home floors? And he sent a message to me, all excited about this new idea that he had, and I had never told him about the sad tale of, well, the Robot Talent Show, and then what had happened at Denning. And actually, in the early days of iRobot, we had tried to get, Bissell Corporation interested in developing a little floor cleaner robot, and that hadn't gone well at all either. But we thought it might be time to try again. So we, this guy Paul Sandin and I, we wrote up this proposal to management at iRobot. It looks a little bit like the proposal that I wrote up for Denning, but we're much more sophisticated this time, and we presented it to the management. And at this point, I want to take a step back because to acknowledge that cleaning the floor with a robot was not a new idea at all. The earliest serious attempt that I can find came from 1957, when Whirlpool Corporation had this presentation that on TV that was watched by like 40% of the people in the country who had TVs at the time, and they called it the Whirlpool Miracle Kitchen, and it had all sorts of wonderful things. There was an electronic oven. It was actually a microwave, but an electronic oven that would cook your food in the blink of an eye. And they had not just this robot, but they had another robot that would bring your meal to the table, and you put the dirty dishes in the robot. It would take them away and clean them. And at the end, this little robot, which never had a name, came out to clean the floor. And they actually tried to build this thing. There was a guy at an engineer at Whirlpool called Donald Moore, who built this robot. And it sort of worked, except that you had to build into the floor this path. You put some ferrous material into the floor in a long, circuitous path, and the robot would follow that. Which means that if it bumped into something, it would just stop, right? Because it didn't know what to do next. It could only follow its path. And like I was saying, many people and many corporations over many years poured lots and lots of cash and lots of engineering time into trying to build a robot. Probably the one that got the farthest was Electrolux, and they actually put this robot, which they call the Trilobite, on the market while we were developing Roomba. But anyway, back to the Roomba story. So management liked our idea about building a little robot that would clean home floors, so they gave Paul and I a budget of $10,000, and they gave us 2 weeks to come up with a prototype. And at the end of that, we had this robot called Scamp, which pretty much did the right things. And Paul and I demonstrated this to the management at iRobot, and I'm thinking, this is kind of like what had happened before. Am I going to be searching for a job as soon as this presentation is over? But no, it worked out this time. And instead of getting fired, they decided to put together this team and build the robot. So these are the people on the core team, and their signatures are all on the robot that I have on the table there. You can come up and take a look at it. And the folks are all kind of colorful. Winston majored in physics, and then he got a PhD in geophysics. He didn't like that, so he went to become a congressional aide. He did that for a while. He didn't like that, and then he went to Wharton for business school, and so he ended up doing business. You know my story. Paul Sandin he went to college a couple of times, dropped out, couldn't find something he wanted to do. He worked in boathouses and in small theater companies, finally settled on robotics. Phil started off in physics and sculpture, of all things. So it was a kind of an eclectic collection of folks. And here are a few scenes from the development of Roomba that we were all sort of smushed together in this tiny office. There were 6 of us in the office. Winston, our project manager, had a little bit more prestigious office in another part of the building, but here's as we were working on Roomba, this is kind of what it looked like. So it was a very good thing that we liked each other because we were all very close there. And so at some point during the development, they decided to have a focus group. Now, I haven't mentioned much about the technology of the robot, but one of the things that we thought was going to make our robot work where all the other ones hadn't was that instead of using a vacuum, which uses a huge amount of power and forces some very uncomfortable engineering trade-offs, we would use a carpet sweeper mechanism, because a carpet sweeper mechanism cleans with great efficiency. You don't need a huge battery for that. So at the focus group, and this is not a picture from the focus group, but it looked exactly like that. Really, there's the engineers around the table, the snacks on the table, and the big one-way mirror, and on the inside there's a facilitator, and then certified regular people that are going to look at your thing. So the facilitator told the people, told the participants, she had showed them a prototype Roomba, and she showed them cleaning the floor, and they could actually see that it does clean the floor, and without mentioning how it worked. So at some point, people were talking about it as the vacuum, right? And she mentioned, no, actually, it's not a vacuum. It doesn't have a vacuum in it. It's just it's a sweeper. And before she told them that, she had asked, okay, what would you expect to pay if you saw this thing sitting in the store shelves? And people would say, a variety of numbers. Some of them were around to $200 that we hoped to charge for it. But then after she told them, no, it doesn't have a vacuum, people cut their estimate in half of what they would pay. So that was a huge blow. We had built this thing thinking that this is the way to achieve the power budget, and now something's wrong. Now people don't want that. So we had to scramble, and what we realized that it needed to say on the box that it has a vacuum, and we were willing to strap a vacuum on, even though it didn't do anything, so we could say it on the box. But we actually found a really cool way to build a vacuum that did something. Now, a normal vacuum that you plug into your wall draws 1,200 watts. Our robot had a power budget of 30 watts. The power that we could use to power everything on the robot was only 30 watts. And by the time we got to the end there, we figured we could give the vacuum 3 watts. So from 1,200 down to 3, well, what can it do? What we figured out was that if you make, the thing that counts is the speed of the air going through, that's sucking stuff up. And a regular vacuum has a brush in the middle and this wide inlet, and the brush sits in the middle of the wide inlet, so there's a huge volume of air that you have to suck into the machine, which requires a huge amount of power. But if we made the inlet really, really narrow, we could get the same air velocity with a much smaller amount of power. So that's what we did. And that's our vacuum, our micro vacuum here. Anyway, but it actually does work, because if you run this thing on a hard floor and then walk on it barefoot, there's no grit at all. And without the vacuum, you get some grit. So it actually did what we wanted to. Then there was another problem. Things were going really well, and we were a few weeks away from this thing called commit to tooling. And when you do commit to tooling, it means you tell the factory, okay, go ahead and spend tens of thousands of dollars cutting the steel molds that are going to make the parts for your machine. And so Winston brought the team together one day and said, let's do a quick test of the final Roomba prototype. So we put some dirt on the floor, we pointed the robot at the dirt, pushed the button, and the robot drove over the dirt, and it was still there. The robot didn't clean. It's supposed to be ready in 2 weeks. You're going to tell the people the factory people to, okay, go, and the robot did not work. So that led to a panic. And so we worked frantically on it for a few days, and it turned out that I had been making, it was my fault, I had been making a mistake about how the cleaning mechanism of a carpet sweeper works. And I had made that same mistake since the very first days of the Robot Talent Show, and if you look closely, you'll see the mistake embedded in the thing sitting on the table here. But we figured it out. We had this glass table, and you could put the robot on top and some dirt on top, and you could look at the robot up underneath. And eventually I figured out what was really going on and how carpet sweeper really works. So then it was easy to fix the robot, and it cleaned again. Now it turned out that we were kind of manipulated in a way. What the engineers didn't realize was that Winston had engineered, our project manager had engineered both of these things, both the focus group and the test, because he knew there was something wrong with the robot in each case. And he couldn't just tell the engineers, you have to fix this because, well, that's wrong. And we knew that it worked the way that we thought it did. So he engineered a way to show us that the thing wasn't working properly. And when we saw it for ourselves, then we were finally convinced, and we worked on it and made it work. So then Roomba was launched in September 2002, and here's the original box. And a curious thing you might see if you look carefully at the box, nowhere does it say that this device is a robot. We were worried that people would think, well, robot, that's like Terminator. It's going to come into your house, and zap your children or something. So instead, it was called an intelligent floorback. That's the only thing we ever called it. But it worked out, and it hit the market, and the first batch of robots sold out very quickly. And then the company thought this was going to be a big hit, so they ordered a much bigger batch for the second year. And then, along about November or so, they noticed the warehouses are still full of robots. The robots are not selling the way that they would. We kind of hit a plateau. And then, and management were thinking that Roomba had failed, that we were going to have to discontinue it. And then this commercial came out.
I'll be ready to go in a minute.
Take your time. A vacuum. You like that, don't you? All right, thirsty now, ain't you? Little Pepsi. Oh, man. Your vacuum cleaner ate my pants. There's nothing I could do.
Nothing chases chips like a Pepsi. It's the cool.
Now, if you can figure out why that commercial sells Pepsi or why it sells robot vacuum cleaners, please enlighten me, because I can't figure out either thing. But after that commercial came on, then sales took off again, and in some sense, the rest is history. So a few years later, I think it was 2004, I was at home one night watching Saturday Night Live when this skit came on. Roomba has become a cultural icon. It was mind-boggling. But anyway, so after 15 years as a startup, iRobot was finally able to do an IPO, and this is the day that became listed on NASDAQ, and stocks became worth something, and everything was fine. So we finally arrived at our fairy tale ending. But of course, there's a little more. There aren't any fairy tales in real life, and the rest of the tale goes like this. So before Roomba, every startup has sort of one mission while it's a startup, and that's to find a business plan that works. So what that means is that you are sort of in the business of exploration. It's like the old prospector, scouring desolate lands for treasure. You have to follow your instincts because there aren't any rules. There's no map that shows you where the gold is buried that hasn't been found yet. You're kind of bouncing around, trying different things and trying to figure it out. But if you find gold, in the unlikely event, mostly the prospectors die in the desert, but if you find the gold, then everything changes. Then instead of exploration, you get to a phase of exploitation. The folks who finance you insist on it. So during this first phase, the 12 years or so that the company was operating before Roomba came out, I was always thinking that as soon as we have a little cash, as soon as we have an income stream, then that will allow us to have all kinds of more freedom. We'll be able to look for all sorts of different robots. We'll build different robots for all sorts of different niches. But what actually happened was that the bean counters think that once we found something that works, there's no reason to take such risks anymore. We'll just exploit what we have. And then basically everything changed. There was creative people are difficult to manage, and the company had no more use for them. Now they want people who will follow the rules, who will do the corporate dictates and all of that. So the Roomba team basically left, and the company took a very different track, and they never again came up with a really revolutionary product. And that plan, endorsed by business schools around the world, that plan worked for about 20 years. The thing that makes it a little problematic is that eventually that gold, the vein runs out, and then what do? So I don't know if you have followed the recent news about iRobot, but they're not doing well, and the management is saying that they may not survive for the next year. Anyway, that's where we are now, sadly. So basically, this talk has been an advertisement for my new book, which tells the story of Roomba, and it's called, Dancing with Roomba, Cracking the Robot Riddle and Building an Icon. And it should be out in November of this year, at least if things go well. Anyway, thank you for your attention. How great.
So what was the venture catalyst that came in that kind of made you follow the rules?
I don't know. Our CEO, Colin Engel, had always said iRobot should be the robot company, which made me think he wanted to build all sorts of different robots, and he was in charge, so maybe he changed his mind, or maybe he was pushed into doing things differently. I really have no idea. Yeah.
What was the connection between Saturday Night Live, the Roomba, and the
Roomba and Roomba.
Roomba, sorry.
Yeah.
Was there a conversation before you put that stick together? Was there any compensation for?
So I was only on the technical side and don't know about that. But as far as I heard, there was nothing. It was a total surprise when it came on TV that night. Yeah. That I don't know. I probably did. But again, I wasn't privy to business matters and matters of income. Yeah.
How does that get recharged?
Well, this one you had to plug it in. Ever since that one, the second generation and all further generations, they're able to home in on the charging station and charge themselves.
That's the two of our core values.
Oh, good. The what?
I've heard variations like the one that does the wet ice sweeper, and a friend of ours was doing the gutter cleaner who started the windows all iRobot.
So the gutter cleaner there was this guy named Jim Lynch, and every time we'd have a meeting, he would promote this idea he called the gutter ball, where you take this thing, you throw it up on your roof, and roll down the gutter and clean the gutter. That's not what they actually eventually developed, but they did do that. But then it got discontinued. Not enough people bought it. The wet mop, the first version of that was made by a company that I called Evolution Robotics, I think it was this. And iRobot bought them out or something like that. So it's now called Brava, and yeah. Yeah.
From a technical point of view, how did you read small patents, all the existing patents to come up with your new product?
Well, they all took different approaches to how they're going to do the robot, and you can't patent the idea of a robot that cleans the floor, right? You have this patent, we're going to do it this thing this way and this other thing this other way, and we didn't do those things those ways. So it was easy, actually. Yeah.
I seem to remember in an auction console a few years ago, something for mowing the lawn.
Yes.
You also developed that.
iRobot worked on a lawn mowing robot for at least 15 years, because I worked on that when I was there, and then they decided not to do it. And then another time or two, they worked further on it and decided not to do it. And then they decided that they needed this positioning system for the robot, so they always know where it was, and that system relied on frequencies that radio astronomers use. So they made the radio astronomer community angry when they got permission to use that band, and then they still didn't put it on the market. So our robot never marketed their robot lawnmower, sadly.
I think that's not killer.
Yeah.
What? Oh,
The weeder.
oh, the weeder? Yeah, that was the third company that I worked on, and it's no longer available, sadly. We sold about 7,000 units, which is a respectable number of robots, but it turned out it probably would have been a good as a sort of a lifestyle company. So if anybody wants a lifestyle company, it's there to be taken over. But none of the people who were working on it wanted to do that, so it's kind of discontinued, sadly.
What do you mean lifestyle?
Basically it supports one person, one or two people, and you would sort of milk it for the money, right? You wouldn't try to develop new products or anything like that. You just you go with what you have, and it would work fine for that. They couldn't find anybody who wanted to do that.
So did going back to the turtle, did that must borrow some of the technology to that? Does everybody know what a turtle is?
Yeah, it's this little robot about so tall, about yay tall and yay big around, and you put it in your garden in the spring, and it charges itself with solar power, and it just moves around, and it keeps the weeds from growing in your garden. So I had a garden, and I used it, and it worked fine. What was the question?
Well, yeah, cuts off weed wax.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right, the
some
technology?
Of this technology?
The turtle used behavior-based programming, but not any particular thing that came from Roomba.
People out of books that that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So if they could do something like that, on board.
Well, you can. In fact, actually, that is the way that up until recently, all robot lawnmowers did work that way. That you put this wire, you have to bury a wire around the perimeter of your lawn, and it has to be a powered wire because it has to make a signal that the robot can detect going towards the wire, and then it just sort of bounces around and cleans in the same way that the first Roomba is cleaned. Now you can, supposedly you can get the lawnmowers that, follow that, it's called a boosted freedom path, and it goes back and forth like that, rather than random. I haven't seen one of them. I don't know how well they work.
Any other question?
Was it? So I seem to remember the things that we need to do. I don't know, like set boundaries. What is that part of the plan, or was it unique that it didn't need those?
We had a thing we called the virtual wall, and the little top knot on the robot thing is what detected the virtual wall. There's a beam of light that you would point across any opening that you didn't want Roomba to cross, and when the robot detected it, it would turn away. So we did have that, yeah.
What about it's how you feel for the little video that
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.